Welcome back to It Was Always Jesus. I'm Antonio. Israel has walked out of Egypt, free at last after 4 centuries of slavery. The Red Sea is behind them, but the Promised Land is still ahead. And between where they stand and where they're going, God has something important He wants to give them. Episode 6. The Law at Sinai and the Wilderness. The law that showed us our need. 3 months after leaving Egypt, Israel arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai. And God descended on that mountain in fire and smoke and thunder, and a sound like a trumpet blast so loud the entire camp of Israel trembled. God called Moses up the mountain, and there, in that fire and cloud, He spoke. He gave Israel the law, the Torah. The first 5 books of the Bible, traditionally attributed to Moses, contain the most detailed legal and religious code in the ancient world. But it begins with 10 commandments that have shaped civilization for 3,000 years. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not covet. 10 commandments, not 10 suggestions, not 10 guidelines. 10 non-negotiable moral realities grounded in the character of God Himself. The first 4 about how to relate to God, the last 6 about how to relate to each other. Jesus would later summarize all 10 in 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. God also gave Israel an elaborate system of worship: the tabernacle, the priesthood, the sacrificial system. The tabernacle was a portable sanctuary, a tent structure, in the center of the camp where God's presence would dwell among His people. It had an outer court, an inner room called the Holy Place, and behind a thick curtain, the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant sat, covered by the mercy seat. Only the high priest could enter the most holy place, and only once a year. On the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, he would bring the blood of sacrifices and sprinkle it on the mercy seat to atone for the sins of the people. Year after year after year, the same sacrifices, the same blood. Never finished, never fully sufficient. Because animal blood could never truly take away human sin. It could cover it temporarily, but it pointed forward to the one whose blood would be sufficient once and for all. But the people struggled. Before Moses had even come back down the mountain with the stone tablets, Israel had already broken the first commandment. They had pressured Aaron into making a golden calf and were worshiping it, saying, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Moses came down the mountain and shattered the tablets. God's anger burned. A plague struck the camp, and Moses pleaded with God, interceding for the people, willing even to have his own name blotted out of God's book if it would save them. God relented. The relationship continued, but the fracture was real. From Sinai, Israel moved toward the Promised Land. 12 spies were sent into Canaan to scout the territory. They came back with a report. The land was everything God had described, flowing with milk and honey. But the cities were fortified. The people were large. And 10 of the 12 spies said, "We can't do this. We seemed like grasshoppers compared to them." Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, behind you said, "We can certainly do it. The Lord is with us." The people believed the 10. They wept and complained and said they wished they'd died in Egypt. They spoke of choosing a new leader and going back. And God said, 40 years. Because they refused to trust Him and enter the land, that entire generation, except Joshua and Caleb, would wander in the wilderness for 40 years until they all died there. Their children would be the ones to inherit the Promised Land, 40 years in the desert. Manna from heaven every morning, water from rocks, quail blown in by the wind. God's provision never failed. But neither did Israel's complaining. They grumbled about the food, they grumbled about Moses, they grumbled about the journey. At one point, serpents came into the camp and people began to die from their bites. Moses prayed and God told him to make a bronze snake and put it on a pole. Anyone who had been bitten could look at the bronze snake and live. Jesus referenced that moment directly. He said to Nicodemus, "Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in Him. Look and live." That's still the invitation. Look to the one lifted up on the cross and live. The law was not given as a ladder to climb to God. It was given to show us how far we were from God. As Paul writes in Romans, through the law we become conscious of our sin. The law is like a mirror. It shows you exactly what's wrong, but it can't fix it. The law pointed forward to the one who would fulfill every requirement of the law perfectly and then take the penalty of every broken law upon himself. Moses himself would not enter the promised land. He had one moment of disobedience, striking a rock in anger when God had told him to speak to it. And God told him he would see the land but not enter it. After 40 years of leading a stubborn, faithless people through the wilderness, Moses climbed Mount Nebo, looked out over the land God had promised to Abraham, and died there. God buried him, and the people mourned for 30 days. The wilderness years are hard to read. So much failure, so much stubbornness, so much wasted time. But God never abandoned them. His pillar of cloud led them by day, and his pillar of fire led them by night. For 40 years. He never left, not once. Next episode, a new leader steps up. And God's people finally cross the Jordan River and enter the land they've been promised since Abraham. But taking it won't be easy. Joshua is about to lead a charge. I'll see you in episode 7.